Hello, Rising Phoenix family. Mr. Trevor Master Olds here with another conversation from the Hearth. We wanted to talk today about white belt etiquette.
Yes.
You saw a post that kind of got your gears turning about this topic. Can you talk a little bit about what the first idea that you had kind of was about? Because it was a little bit about kind of white belts coaching each other. I don't know if that's where you wanted to start.
I mean, that's kind of a long-standing issue that we've had in the martial arts. We don't have it actually very much in our school. In fact, all of these white belt etiquette things I don't think are so much an issue at our school. It may be that I'm not a white belt myself anymore, so it's hard for me to kind of gauge that, but I really feel like the students we have tend to be pretty...
I know I certainly don't see it on the mats.
But I do see this a lot in other schools. And so it's good to be mindful of these tendencies as we move forward, because they could start kind of rearing their ugly heads. The thing that the post that I saw that kind of got me thinking about things was, white belt coaching.
So white belts coaching other white belts, higher belts, that kind of thing?
Yeah, white belts coaching other white belts, or what actually is surprisingly common is white belts coaching blue belts, red belts, even black belts, and the higher you go up that chain, the more obnoxious it becomes. And
what does that kind of look like?
When the instructor is walking around, you'll see, I'll do a group of 3 people, and there'll be like a black belt and a blue belt and a white belt, and the white belt is literally trying to teach the black belt and the blue belt how to do the technique. And that sounds kind of far-fetched, but it's actually not that uncommon. It's very common. And in that situation, the white belt and the blue belt should really be differential to the black belt, in my opinion. It's not to say that the white belt doesn't have anything to offer. I believe as a good instructor, you should always be listening to your students and have an open mind. You can always be wrong. But, first we need to empty our cup before we can start filling it up again. And when a white belt thinks they know everything, it's very hard for them to learn anything.
And when you were talking about this before, you brought up something that I thought was very interesting, which is, like you're saying, there's always, you should never shut your mind off from new ways of learning, and new sources of learning. But when you're questioning in that way, and there's positive ways of questioning, and then there's kind of negative ways of questioning. Yeah. It can sometimes manifest in that. It can sometimes manifest as trying to show off that you know something better than another, especially like you're saying, if someone comes from another school and they have a way that they do it and they're trying to teach the blue belts or the black belts in this school why their way of doing it is wrong, right? We kind of had a conversation about that before. So there's that way, which is kind of arrogance and showing off. There's also the other way that you were talking about, which was feeling insecure about it and not wanting to do it, and so they end up talking about it so they don't have to do it. Yeah,
so I see coaching more common in very competitive schools. And I think what happens is, really competitive sparring-based schools tend to have a lot of coaching during the drilling. And what I think is actually happening is you have a student, who is not being particularly successful when it comes to sparring. Like they're kind of losing to everybody, but they feel like they should be winning because they feel like for whatever reason they should be doing better. And so when they're not sparring, when they're more of a controlled and safe environment, they try to rack their brain for every possible tidbit of knowledge they know to try to broadcast to everybody around them that they actually know what they're doing, because it's not immediately apparent based on their abilities when they're actually out there sparring. And that's really, in my opinion, coming from a place of insecurity. And while you might be inclined to say, my white belt might have the right idea, from time to time, I think buying too much into that delusion creates a precedent for people to be rampantly insecure. And while Trevor was just telling me I use this term too often, but breaking people, some people think it's a little harsh. I mean it a little bit jokingly, but we need to kind of dismantle some of these defenses in order to rebuild them in a way that is really truly strong to the core. And one way we do that is by saying, look, you're a white belt. Your job as a white belt is to have an open mind and an empty cup and just take in all of this knowledge. Yeah, you probably know a thing or two and you could talk up and say what you know, but by forcing yourself to just not say anything, you're going to listen a lot better to everything that's going on around you, and you're going to really absorb the knowledge.
So if I can go on a little bit of a tangent here,
Yeah.
It really reminds me of a lot of stuff that I've come across in my theater background. So if I can make an analogy that makes it a little bit clear, kind of imagine that acting is like going into a sparring ring where you are going to feel a lot of adrenaline and a lot of things, and you have to speak eloquently. You have to basically do a form that is highly choreographed. That's really difficult. It's really easy to let your emotions kind of get the better of you. And so I come across a lot of actors who don't want to throw themselves in that very terrifying, vulnerable position, and they want to talk about it. And they get very eloquent about talking about things. And so they end up retreating from the scary, difficult work that is necessary to really be able to just do it. Like, if you can do it, and then we can have a great high-level conversation about themes and things, that's great.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to do the work. You need to be willing to do the work, and you need to be capable of doing the work. And once we get that baseline, then we can have those conversations. That's something that I've come across a lot.
It's one of the reasons I love the martial arts, is we just cut through. We have these mechanisms that allow us to kind of cut through all the BS and like get to really the root of the problem. It's funny because that is exactly the same problem that we have in the martial arts, you know.
Well, and the other thing that you talked about, which I thought was also really great, is having questions for an instructor. There's a healthy way and a respectful way to do that. And what I think is really important about talking today is not just don't do this, you know, these are the things, but talk about why it's important to have these kind of etiquette in place. And the thing that I liked what you were saying about is that you can question an instructor, but if you question them in this kind of aggressive way on the mats in front of everyone, you're putting them on the spot.
Yeah.
And it's often, there's many things that could be said about why we do this technique, and we may not have time to get into that on the mats. And you might be able to argue, well, you know, that's important.
Yeah.
But the thing that follows on that is that when you do that, you put the instructor on the defensive. They have to always be on guard. And when you do that, you create an adversarial relationship with your instructor that is based on, you phrased it better, the instructor always having knowledge that they're withholding from you and they're able to dole out, and creating that kind of a relationship is not...
So if your relationship... I've trained under a lot of different masters and had different relationships with different master instructors. And the best one is a sort of open and vulnerable relationship. But in order for that to thrive, you need to basically be a little bit forgiving of... Everyone's going to have their strong suits and their weak suits. And just to kind of take your partners and your instructor as a whole and not try to nitpick them and tear them apart and be in this sort of adversarial relationship. Because like Mr. Trevor's saying, when you're in that kind of relationship, the instructor is going to turtle up and they're going to try to not share so much knowledge with you because they don't want you to get better than them, because it's very apparent that your respect for them is not based on what they've done for you and how much love they've shown you, but instead is based on their ability to beat you on the mat and to know more about the martial arts than you. And that's kind of, as an instructor, from my opinion, is kind of a threatening position to be in. It basically means like, okay, well, I'm going to have to beat this person or they're not going to respect me every single day
for the rest of your
life.
life.
I'm not going to share all my secrets with them. And so and I don't think the person who's doing that realizes that's what's going to happen, but that is what happens. And so the people who are kind of the more gentle, vulnerable souls, you know, they end up going further down the path than the person who is kind of a hot shot, who thinks they kind of know everything, who's trying to dismantle the instructor every chance they get. Listen, when I was growing up and training in the martial arts, all my Korean masters would tell me, you know, don't ask questions during the class. You have a question, ask it, at the end of class. And I think that's a little, that's good, but I also think it can sometimes steer us too much away from knowledge. And I think it's important to ask those questions. I like it when, students ask me, sir, what's the counter to this move? How do we employ this technique? Blah, blah, blah. But I don't like it when, a student comes to me and says, well, you could just do this. And I'm like, yeah, but you just walked into this and, you couldn't do that if I was doing this. And now we're getting into this really it almost sometimes, when I have this kind of smart ass student who's trying to be oh, you could do this and you do this. It's like, yeah, but you just you know so little about all this other stuff around here that you're so focused on this one thing that what you just said to me just shows, you think it shows that you really know what you're talking about, but it really shows how little you understand all the other things that are surrounding this.
Yeah, because you got out of this, but you open yourself up to 20 different vulnerabilities that put you in a worse overall position. Yeah.
So, my opinion with questions on the floor is if this is central to what we're doing, on the mat, we're trying to learn how to generate power, ask your question. If you get a response, accept that response. If you just need a little bit of clarity on it, you can maybe ask a few more, another time. But don't just badger the instructor, try to find, holes in his knowledge and try to outsmart him. That's clearly not a good relationship to be in. So that's that. There's also some other things that I wanted to talk about.
Do you want to go into the next one? Or?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I see sometimes, it's kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, is people get on the mats and they want to create their own experience for themselves. They say, well, I'll do martial arts, but I don't want to wear the uniform, or I don't want to say yes, sir, or I want to be able to create a list of things that I can and can't do. I don't want to be holding paddles because I've literally had people say, I'm a surgeon, my hands are worth millions, I don't want to hold a paddle because I'm afraid I might get my hand hit and I might break my hand. Guys, my hands aren't worth millions, but if I don't have hands, I can't do the job that I do every single day on the mat. If anyone is worried about their body and getting hurt and whatever, it's a person who literally has to use their body every day to teach my martial arts. But that's part of being a martial artist. That goes with the territory. That's like asking, a pro football player not to play football because he might get hurt to play football. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So don't, and it comes from this place of sort of insecurity and fear, and you just need to be willing to throw yourself into the mix. The reason why you need a coach is because a coach will push you harder than you ever push yourself. But you can only harness the power of that if you say, look, you do with me what you will, and I will do my best to keep up with all of your commands. And when you're in that relationship, you're going to push yourself really hard. And that's also why respect and discipline are so important, like saying yes, sir, and really developing this vulnerable relationship with your master instructor. Because when you really respect your master instructor, and he respects you, and you've developed this great relationship, you're going to push yourself so much harder than you would for someone you kind of don't really respect that much, and you just kind of go in there and do your thing. And that's honestly why people want to create their own structured sort of experiences, because they're afraid of really putting in the reps that are needed to be done to get good.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about was that we sometimes see in white belts is bad partnering. We see this a lot.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Yes. Bad partnering is actually, I think that's the most common. That's,
but because it's got a lot of facets to it and it manifests in
that's something that we do have a little bit of problem with in our own school.
I think it's just because it's something that's learned, and so every person who comes in.
Well, it's partly because no one knows how to be a good partner. It's not exactly intuitive. I think people think that being trying to simulate reality is going to be the best way to be a partner, and that's not necessarily
so
true.
We're talking about in different defenses where we're doing wrist grab escapes, things like that.
Someone will be learning a defense for the first time, and the person, I see this all the time. You have two people working together. One person's kind of a soft soul who's vulnerable, and the other person's kind of tough and thinks that they're like the best and all this kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, their technical ability is about the same. But when this person goes to do it on this guy, this person is like kind of goes with it and lets him kind of learn the technique. And so the more competitive person thinks, I'm really good. And then when the more soft soul goes to do it, they do it the exact same way, but the other one's like really resisting and making it and moving in ways that makes it hard. They literally are like moving.
They're like trying.
They're
to
like
resist
trying
the
to like make it hard for the
yeah.
person. They like know what the person's trying to do, and they're trying not to let them do it. And listen, that's not going to happen. Like when the person does it, it's coming, like it's blindsiding you, and that's why it works. Or if you knew it was going to happen, you never get it to work. You know, if I said I'm going to punch you in the face, I'm not going to punch you in the face because you're going to go whoop every single time. You're going to block it every single time. But it's because you think I'm going to hit, and then I hit you here, that it works, you know? So, yeah, that kind of partner relationship is something that, it comes from a place of ego. It comes from this, like, I don't want to look bad. I always want to look good. And so I'm never going to, like, let the other person get it. But listen, the place to look bad is drilling, because there's no ego to lose. Like, but the other person getting the technique, it doesn't do anything. No one's going to say, oh, wow, I can't believe they actually got that arm bar on the person, when they were drilling. If you're going to have an ego at all, which I don't think you should, but if you're going to have an ego, I would assume it would be during sparring, It wouldn't be during drilling. But it's so weird. There's a lot of ego even in the drilling. And it sometimes is not just, it's not always just ego. It's like they don't understand. Like sometimes I get these partners who are just like completely floppy. And they're just kind of falling all over the place. And in doing that, they make it very hard to work with them. You know, they're moving this really erratic, swinging around, especially with the little kids sometimes. And it's not like they're trying to be difficult partners. They're just like, they're not taking the responsibility to focus their body in a way that's like meaningful, And finding this good medium where you basically know the technique, you know what the person needs from you, so you're going to make yourself rigid enough that they can accomplish doing the technique, but also not try to like make it really difficult for them so that it's absolutely impossible for them.
You're kind of simulating a neutral body that's not it's not trying to resist it, but it's not just totally falling apart. Go ahead.
And then also, just so people know, so they don't think that we're just trying to avoid actual reality, as you get better at the technique, that is when you start, putting up the resistance and stuff, But that comes like when you're like a black belt and you've been doing this a long time and you know all the techniques like the back of your hand, and you're just, like we need to challenge ourselves, like let's make this more difficult. But it doesn't happen when you're a white belt and you're just learning to move for the first time. That's how you get frustrated.
Especially frustrated, but also it's dangerous. When you don't know what you're doing, you're going as hard as you can, that's when you can actually really injure someone.
That's when people get hurt, is you have one person who, like that soft soul person, for example, he starts getting frustrated because he realizes his partner's kind of being, a jerk. And so after a few times he goes, yeah! And then this person over here goes, oh, he hurt me, he's being too harsh. And from someone who doesn't know much about the martial arts, from their perspective, from maybe some of the parents' perspectives, not to call anyone out or anything, but they think that this person was the one who was being hard on that person. And I was like, couldn't be further from the truth. Because they don't really see the dynamic slowly unfolding between these two individuals. But that's our job as instructors to really, we're not infallible. I mean, we can't be perfect, so we miss things, but we're trying to move around and make sure that the kids are developing in a positive way, working together.
Well, that's about as much time as we have.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that covers a lot. There's different.
There's certainly more that we could talk about, but
absolutely. But until next time, guys, let's keep training hard.